Ma'am, economy boarding is down there. The entire first-class boarding lane fell silent the moment Claire Whitmore pointed across the airport terminal at the black woman standing alone beneath the cold fluorescent lights. Dr. Naomi Carter didn't move. She simply tightened her grip around the worn leather laptop bag hanging from her shoulder, while dozens of strangers slowly turned toward her. A businessman near the front smirked under his breath. Someone behind her whispered, "She probably walked into the wrong line." Naomi's deep brown eyes remained calm, but her jaw tightened slightly as the humiliation spread through the crowd like wildfire. Claire's red lipstick curled into a polished smile designed to look professional while sounding cruel. "People try this all the time," she said, loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Within seconds, smartphones began rising into the air. One woman started live streaming. Another zoomed directly into Naomi's face. Rain hammered against the giant airport windows while boarding announcements echoed overhead. Naomi quietly held up her first-class ticket again, but Claire barely glanced at it before waving her hand dismissively. "You're delaying the boarding process, ma'am." And in that moment, every eye in the terminal decided exactly who Naomi Carter was supposed to be. Just 3 hours earlier, Naomi Carter had stepped out of a black town car in front of Chicago O'Hare International Airport after finishing a 12-hour corporate meeting downtown. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and looking forward to nothing more than sleeping during the flight to New York. Her cream wool coat hung neatly over her slim frame, while the cold evening wind pushed strands of her tired curls against her face. Naomi never traveled with luxury handbags or visible designer brands. She preferred quiet simplicity, something her mother taught her growing up in Atlanta. But over the years, she learned something else too. In America, people often judged power by appearance before intelligence ever had the chance to speak. As she walked through the crowded terminal, she noticed people glancing at her leather bag and plain clothes before looking away again. She was used to it. Years inside corporate boardrooms had taught her how invisible prejudice could become when wrapped inside polite smiles. Her phone vibrated while she waited near the gate. A message appeared from one of her partners. "Board meeting confirmed after landing. Richard Vale attending personally." Naomi slipped the phone back into her pocket without emotion. No one around her knew she represented one of the largest investment groups preparing to finalize a $480 million expansion deal with the airline. And honestly, she preferred it that way. The moment Claire called airport security, the atmosphere inside the boarding lane changed completely. Conversations stopped. Passengers leaned sideways in their seats to watch what was happening, while the live stream viewer count exploded by the second. Naomi could hear snippets of comments from nearby phones. "Another entitled passenger. She's probably lying. Why won't she just leave?" But Naomi still refused to raise her voice. Claire stood taller now, feeding off the attention surrounding her like an actress controlling a stage. "We have policies for a reason," she announced confidently while adjusting her perfect navy blue uniform. Then Todd Mercer arrived. The airport security supervisor moved through the crowd with the heavy confidence of someone already convinced he understood the situation before hearing a single word. He was massive, broad-shouldered, gray buzz cut, jaw tight with irritation. Instead of speaking to Claire first, Todd immediately walked straight toward Naomi. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside." Naomi looked up slowly from her seat near the aircraft entrance. "Why?" Todd crossed his arms. "Because you're creating disruption." Naomi glanced calmly around the cabin where nearly every passenger was filming her. "I haven't raised my voice once." Todd's expression hardened. Around them, more phones lifted into the air. Someone whispered, "This is getting good." Naomi felt the humiliation growing heavier by the second. But what hurt most wasn't the accusations. It was how easily strangers accepted them. A young airline employee finally approached Claire, holding a tablet with the passenger manifest pulled open across the screen. His voice shook slightly. Her seat is legitimate." For a brief second, silence passed through the group. Naomi watched Claire's face carefully. The flight attendant could have ended everything right there. She could have apologized. She could have admitted the mistake. Instead, Claire's eyes darkened with embarrassment at being challenged publicly. "That's enough," she snapped quietly, before turning back toward Todd. "She's still refusing to cooperate." Naomi almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The truth had arrived, yet somehow the situation had become even worse. The live stream comments exploded faster now, because uncertainty made people more vicious. Some viewers defended Naomi, but others doubled down. Fake ticket. Probably edited. Why is she acting so calm? Todd stepped closer until his shadow covered Naomi completely. Last warning, ma'am. Naomi's fingers tightened around her leather bag. She thought about calling one of her partners immediately. One phone call could end everything. But another part of her wanted to see how far this system would go once it believed nobody important was watching. Claire folded her arms with cold satisfaction while passengers stared like spectators waiting for security footage they could repost later online. Then Todd suddenly bent down and reached toward Naomi's bag. And for the first time all night, her expression changed.
Do not touch my property. Naomi's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the cabin hard enough to silence every person inside it. Todd froze mid-motion, with his hand hanging inches above the leather bag. Claire's fake smile disappeared instantly. Even the live streamer stopped speaking for a moment. Naomi slowly stood to her full height, her emerald turtleneck catching the cold white cabin lights while her calm eyes locked directly onto Todd's. You have absolutely no legal right to search my belongings without cause, she said quietly. Todd's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to resistance delivered without fear. Ma'am, you are interfering with airport security procedures. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Interesting, because your employee already confirmed my seat assignment. Todd glanced toward Claire, but Claire looked away this time. Deep down, everyone involved could feel the situation slipping somewhere dangerous. Naomi sat back down slowly and opened her silver laptop. The entire cabin watched her fingers move calmly across the keyboard, while the rain outside intensified against the windows. One passenger whispered, "What is she doing?" Naomi typed a single email containing only 9 words. Then she pressed send. Nothing dramatic happened immediately. No threats, no yelling, just silence. But exactly 30 seconds later, somewhere deep inside the airport executive offices, 3 different phones began ringing at the same time. Richard Vale had been preparing for an emergency merger conference call when his assistant burst into the office holding a tablet with Naomi Carter's live stream pulled across the screen. At first, Richard didn't understand what he was looking at. Then he recognized Naomi sitting inside the first-class cabin while airport security towered over her. The color drained from his face instantly. "What flight is this?" he demanded. "Flight 908, sir." Richard grabbed his jacket and practically ran through the terminal while multiple executives tried calling him simultaneously. Back on the aircraft, Todd attempted to regain control of the situation. "Ma'am, if you continue refusing instructions, we'll escort you off the plane." Naomi calmly closed her laptop. "You're welcome to try." The confidence in her voice unsettled him more than shouting ever could. Then suddenly the cabin door burst open. Richard Vale stepped onto the plane, breathing heavily, his expensive suit soaked slightly from the rain outside. Every passenger turned toward him. Claire immediately straightened her posture, relieved to see upper management arriving. "Sir, thank God, this passenger has been—" "Dr. Carter." Richard's voice cut straight through hers. The cabin went silent again. Richard looked directly at Naomi with visible panic in his eyes. "We weren't informed you were on board tonight." Claire's face turned pale. Todd slowly lowered his hands. And around them, passengers realized the story they had been laughing at seconds earlier was no longer funny at all. The atmosphere inside the aircraft shifted so violently it almost felt physical. Phones that had been recording confidently moments ago now lowered uncertainly as passengers exchanged nervous looks. Claire stared at Richard in disbelief. "You know her?" Richard ignored the question entirely. "Dr. Carter, may we speak privately?" Naomi remained seated calmly. "Interesting," she said softly. "Everyone seemed very comfortable handling this publicly a few minutes ago." Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed loudly. Richard swallowed hard before turning toward Todd and Claire with an expression colder than either of them had shown Naomi earlier. "Step off the aircraft, now." Claire's face flushed deep red. "Sir, I was only following—" "Now." As security and flight staff slowly backed away, the live stream audience exploded online. Clips spread across social media within minutes. Headlines began forming before the plane even pushed back from the gate. Inside the emptying cabin, Richard sat across from Naomi looking 10 years older than he had an hour earlier. "I'm deeply sorry," he began carefully. Naomi folded her hands together.
"You're sorry because of who I am." Richard didn't answer, because they both knew she was right. Naomi leaned slightly forward. "What happens to passengers who don't own 11% of your merger deal?" Richard's silence said more than any apology possibly could. And for the first time that night, Naomi finally allowed herself to look disappointed instead of calm.
3 hours later, an emergency corporate meeting filled the airline's executive boardroom overlooking the rain-covered runway. Claire Whitmore sat rigidly at one end of the table, her perfect buns slightly loose now, red lipstick faded after hours of panic. Todd Mercer stared silently at the floor beside her, while giant digital screens displayed live stream statistics climbing past 4.8 million views. Naomi Carter stood calmly near the windows, the Chicago skyline glowing behind her through the rain. "Federal investigators are already requesting internal footage," one executive whispered nervously. Another screen displayed shareholder concerns flooding the company inbox. Richard rubbed his forehead in exhaustion. "Dr. Carter, tell us what you want." Naomi turned slowly toward the table. "I want evidence that dignity inside this company isn't reserved for passengers who look wealthy enough to deserve it." Nobody spoke. Naomi continued calmly. "Your airline has lost 14% of black premium customers in 3 years. 62 discrimination complaints remain unresolved. Yet tonight, the truth was confirmed almost immediately, and still nobody stopped." Claire finally broke down emotionally. "I was following procedure." Naomi looked directly into her eyes. "Procedure becomes prejudice when it's only applied selectively." The room fell silent again, because every executive there knew she wasn't talking about one airport incident anymore. She was exposing the culture underneath it. By sunrise, the airline's crisis had spread across every major news network in America. Clips of Claire pointing toward economy boarding replayed endlessly beside headlines discussing racial profiling in corporate travel. Protesters gathered outside the airport holding signs, while shareholders demanded accountability. Inside headquarters, emergency reform proposals covered every conference table. Naomi remained calm through all of it. She rejected private settlements immediately. This was never about compensation, she told Richard. Instead, she demanded permanent structural changes, an independent discrimination review board, mandatory bias training monitored externally, a real-time reporting app for passengers, quarterly transparency reports released publicly, and federal oversight during implementation. Several executives resisted until Naomi quietly reminded them that without her signature, the $480 million merger would collapse by morning. That ended the debate instantly. Claire Whitmore was suspended pending investigation before noon. Todd Mercer was removed from supervisory duty. Public apologies flooded every media platform connected to the airline. But Naomi felt no satisfaction watching careers collapse. Late that evening, she finally returned home and sat beside her mother in the kitchen. Her mother looked at her gently. "You okay?" Naomi stared quietly into her untouched tea. After a long silence, she nodded once. "I am now." And somehow, after everything that happened, those 3 words became the most emotional moment of the entire night. 6 months later, Dr. Naomi Carter walked through another airport terminal beneath soft morning sunlight pouring across polished floors. The atmosphere felt completely different now. New anti-bias posters stood near every boarding gate. Employees carried updated training badges attached beside their uniforms. Quietly, almost invisibly, the system had begun changing. Naomi still wore the same cream wool coat, the same emerald turtleneck, and carried the same worn leather bag from the night everything happened. But this time, nobody questioned whether she belonged in first class. A young gate agent smiled warmly as she scanned Naomi's boarding pass. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Carter." Naomi returned a small smile before stepping toward the aircraft. Around her, passengers moved naturally aside, with respect rather than suspicion. Somewhere online, millions of people still debated the viral video that changed the airline forever. Some called it one of those black stories that exposed uncomfortable truths hidden inside everyday life. Others called it one of the most touching stories they had seen all year. But Naomi understood something deeper. Real-life stories rarely change systems because of anger alone. They change because someone finally forces people to see what was always there. And as Naomi disappeared down the jet bridge toward another flight, the silence around her no longer felt like judgment.
It finally felt like dignity.